Here we are at the last scene of Hamlet, where everything goes down and all the tension that has been building up like a dam with a lot of water behind it finally is released. And we'll see if you find it satisfying or not. It's a very long scene, but it's also an action-packed scene. And it begins, of course, with Hamlet catching up with Horatio on all that went down since he left for England. Horatio does not know that Hamlet killed Rosencrantz and Guildenstern through the King of England. He just knows that something happened with pirates, and Rosencrantz and Guildenstern ended up going back to England, or going to England as Hamlet came back to Denmark. Hamlet reveals that there was this fighting in his heart one night while they were passing over into England, and it would not let him sleep. And so he got up and he just was sort of messing around, and he found Rosencrantz and Guildenstern's bags and found the letters that were sealed by Claudius, opened them, and saw that Claudius had asked the King of England to cut off Hamlet's head immediately upon opening these letters. No shriving time or confession time allowed, which is particularly vicious. It's like trying to kill your body, but also trying to send your soul to hell. Hamlet, by fortune, woke up, by God's fortune, happened to have his father's ring. He also had learned how to write status right, and so he wrote a letter to the King of England, 2 letters actually, that were in the voice of Claudius, and asked for the King of England to chop off Rosencrantz and Guildenstern's heads, no shriving time allowed, folded them up, sealed them, and put them back in their backpacks. So Rosencrantz and Guildenstern have been sent packing, and Horatio's a little shocked that Hamlet did this. And Hamlet does not have any regrets about it. He can be quite bloody. He says, "They come not near my conscience." It's kind of odd to us, but Hamlet does see, he gets kind of more religious as the play goes on. That's part of his peacefulness with his identity in the world. He claims that God brought him back to Denmark, and that God must want him to do something to kill Claudius, to become the new king, to cleanse the country. He doesn't really know what, but Hamlet's like, I didn't do anything to come back to Denmark, yet here I am. So he sees God's hand in the fact that he woke up unexpectedly in the boat that night. I've always liked the line where he says, "Sir, in my heart there was a kind of fighting that would not let us sleep." And he says he was rash. And he says, and sometimes our rashness, our clumsiness serves us well when our deep plots do pall. He was like, maybe I was trying too hard to make the revenge happen. And when I stopped trying, it should teach me that there's a divinity that shapes our ends, rough hew them as we will. We might make some choices, but divinity comes in and sort of makes them work out toward what God wants them to be. He, as I mentioned, he sort of sees God's providence in the fact that he woke up, and in the fact that he had his father's ring, and in the fact that he looked at the letters, and he's not sorry about killing them. After they finish their conversation about Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, a courtier enters, one more character to meet. His name is Osric, and he's typically a fop, if you know what that is. He's a corrupt courtier, kind of thinks a lot of himself, speaks unnecessarily fancy. This is not particularly fun to read because the language is so old, but Osric speaks fancy to Hamlet, and then Hamlet speaks even fancier back to Osric so that Osric doesn't know what he's talking about. Mostly he's a comic figure. Hamlet says this guy thinks he's important because he owns a lot of land or a lot of dirt, and he talks too much. He's meant to kind of show the oozy kind of corruption of Claudius's court, how sycophantic and fickle they are. Hamlet, shows that he's sort of a kiss butt, a people pleaser, and makes him take his hat on and put it back on, and take his hat on and put it. He'll do whatever you want because he just wants to be on your good side. Now that's just sort of his character, but plot-wise, he's there to ask Hamlet if he will fence with Laertes. This is a friendly sporting match because the king has laid a bet that Hamlet will fence better than Laertes. Hamlet harasses Osric a while for his own amusement, but eventually agrees to have this fencing match with Laertes. But he's also a little bit troubled. Horatio says, you only have a certain amount of time here, Hamlet, before you get in a lot of trouble. It must be shortly known to Claudius from England what is the issue of the business there. Claudius is going to hear that you killed Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. And Hamlet says, yes, it's a short amount of time, but the interim is mine. I'm in control here, and a man's life no more than to say one. But I am very sorry, good Horatio, that to Laertes I forgot myself. For by the image of my cause I see the portraiture of his. I'll court his favors. This is what I call the PR job that's happening on Hamlet. Remember, one of the problems of the revenge play is how does the revenger do his revenge? without becoming worse than the person he's revenging himself upon? Shakespeare sort of solves it by making Hamlet as noble and clean-spirited as he possibly can. Hamlet says, I recognize that I am a father killer and I want to kill a father killer. I see that Laertes has a right to be angry with me. I'll court his favors. I'll try to ask his forgiveness, and that's indeed what Hamlet does. So Hamlet is not bloody, even though he said at the end of Act 4 that his thoughts would be bloody. Hamlet is not angry. Hamlet is not planning anything. Hamlet is simply living, as we'll see. Hamlet does feel like something bad is coming. You know, after Osric leaves, a more ominous second lord comes in and sort of says, are you ready to fence right now? This sort of rush to judgment, this push, makes Horatio and Hamlet sensitive to or suspicious of something bad's going to happen. Horatio sees that Hamlet's heart is troubling him, and he says, if your mind dislike anything, obey it. I will forestall their repair and say you are not fit to compete. And Hamlet says the most important lines in the play, in my mind. He says, not a whit. We defy augury. He's using this royal we and saying, I defy the bad feelings in my heart. There is a special providence in the fall of a sparrow. If it be now, 'tis not to come. If it be not to come, it will be now. If it be not now, yet it will come. The readiness is all. Since no man of aught he leaves knows, what is it to leave betimes? Let be. The answer to the question of to be or not to be seems to be let be. Hamlet becomes at peace. He's like, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. I just have to be ready. Nobody can control anything about what happens after they die. So what does it matter when you die? You have no control over anything. Just let it be. Hamlet's at peace, and a lot of times this scene is portrayed as a sort of death acceptance. He knows he's going to die in this last scene, and he is also saying goodbye to Horatio, so it's one of my favorite scenes. So as I mentioned, Shakespeare goes out of his way to make Hamlet noble and clean in Act 5, even though Hamlet is responsible technically, if you count it up, for so many deaths. He's sorry about what he did to Laertes, but he enters the last scene of the play with no plan for revenge, not even an idea of doing revenge at this moment. He's just living in the present. So I'm not going to go through every little thing that happens in the rest of the play, but it is just kind of fantastic, like a magic clock in which everybody gets what they deserve. The part I've always liked is, the moment that Gertrude drinks the wine, a clock starts ticking and you know things have gone wrong. And Claudius and Laertes cannot stop anything from happening now at this point. But this is the third interrupted ceremony in the play. Hamlet does round 1 and gets the point. Hamlet does round 2 and gets the point. And then in round 3, everything goes crazy when Laertes, kind of in a timeout or between rounds moment, injures Hamlet with his poisoned sword, and so we know the clock is ticking on Hamlet. Then Hamlet injures Laertes, the clock is ticking on Laertes. And then they die one by one, starting with Gertrude, who kind of unbeknownst drank the poison, getting her just desserts. She married a murderer unaware, she drinks her poison unaware. It's kind of appropriate the murdering husband actually murdered her with the instrument of his choice, the cowardly weapon of poison. She dies first. Then Laertes dies, and one of my favorite moments of the play is, of course, Laertes, as he's fighting Hamlet, realizes that Hamlet is so harmless, and Hamlet is in terms of Hamlet is not trying to do anything evil, he's just playing a game. Laertes starts to think it's against his conscience. Hamlet apologizes to Laertes before they start, and Laertes sees the apology as so noble, he kind of doesn't want to kill Hamlet. But he apologizes to Hamlet for killing him, and says the most beautiful lines, "Exchange forgiveness with me, noble Hamlet. Mine and my father's death come not upon thee, nor thine on me. Exchange forgiveness with me. Forgive me for killing you, and and hopefully I forgive you for the things you've done against me." And Hamlet says, "Heaven make thee free of it." These two young men reconcile and forgive each other, while the corrupt old people around them have destroyed their lives. It's very, very terrible. Gertrude dies, Laertes dies, Hamlet is dying, and when Laertes reveals the whole game that Claudius is behind everything, Hamlet double kills Claudius, which is satisfying. He's the third one to die. Stabs him and poisons him, makes him drink the cup of poisoned wine. And then Hamlet himself, after giving 3 long speeches, which people tend to laugh at because they take so long to die, but I always say Hamlet is so noble and brave that it takes a long time for that heart to crack. But Hamlet eventually dies, saying the mysterious last line, "The rest is silence." And Horatio gives him the most beautiful eulogy in all of Western literature, where he sees his friend die and says, "Now cracks a noble heart. Good night, sweet prince, and flights of angels sing thee to thy rest." He wishes him that the angels would come down and swoop Hamlet's spirit up and take him to heaven. His heart is noble and it's cracked. Horatio is a tragic figure in some ways because he lives through it all and has to testify. Don't forget about Fortinbras. Fortinbras has gone to Poland, has beat up Poland, and is just returning when he comes back, and he comes into a room full of dead noble people, and he just thinks, my goodness, I have some rights of memory in this kingdom to which my vantage doth invite me. He's at the right place at the right time. The readiness is all. We see that Hamlet actually wants Fortinbras to take over Denmark. He says, I do prophesy that the election lights on Fortinbras. He'll be the next king of Denmark. And he has my dying voice, says Hamlet. I vote for him. Hamlet never actually gets to speak to Fortinbras, but Fortinbras comes in and takes the crown. And Horatio says, please bring all these bodies on a stage and stop all this crazy killing that's going on, and I will tell you all the things that happened in this play. And Fortinbras says, let us haste to hear it, and call the noblest of the audience. For me, with sorrow, I embrace my fortune. He sees Hamlet's body and he honors Hamlet and says, let 4 captains bear Hamlet like a soldier to the stage, for he was likely, had he been put on, to have proved most royal. So he has Hamlet given a soldier's burial. They pick up all the bodies, take up the bodies, says Fortinbras. Such a sight as this becomes the field. It looks good on a battlefield, but inside the castle shows much amiss. And then he says the last line of the play, which is, go, bid the soldiers shoot. And they pick up all the bodies, including Hamlet. They take them all off stage while the soldiers shoot, I guess, an honorable, 21-gun salute to Hamlet. Is it good that Fortinbras took over? Hamlet seemed to want it. Is it good that the national sovereignty of Denmark is now actually a part of Norway? But we see that all revenge plots have been resolved. Hamlet got his revenge, Laertes got his revenge, Fortinbras gets his revenge, and there's really nobody left alive to seek revenge. So somehow Shakespeare has solved the revenge plots without having a continuance of them, which is kind of amazing. But it required an apocalypse and cleaning off the stage of everyone. So if you've made it this far, you've made it through Hamlet, and hopefully you're satisfied and maybe a little dissatisfied with the ending when you're unsure about the mystery of Fortinbras. But typically people feel pretty good when they reach the end of this play. You have read the longest play that Shakespeare wrote, and some say his greatest. And there's much to say now that we've read all 5 acts to think about, well, what does it all mean?